Thanks for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all our latest video content. If you're watching on LocalGov TV, be sure to visit their website to see all of the content made for you by your local governments. Alamance County is pleased to present the Alamance County Commissioners Meeting.
call the meeting to order. Ms. Thompson, I think you have the honors.
I do. If we could all stand, invocation first. I'm in a hurry. I was thinking about our soldiers, so.
Extra tall cup of coffee this morning,
No,
right, family?
y'all, in about 5 minutes, I'm gonna be speaking tongues. I'm just gonna let you know. So let's all bow our heads. Heavenly Father, I'm so thankful to be here and be with my fellow commissioners, these fine folks in this meeting. I pray that you will give us all discernment, patience, calmness, and just let us all always focus on what is important to you and to what is important to our county. Bless this day and just help us to be the leaders that you want us to be. In your precious name I pray, amen. Now let's stand for the prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion on the agenda.
And if you would, please, sir.
We have a request to remove item 8A from the agenda. The VIA representative is sick this morning, and we've had a request to move item 8E for the chamber into the first place, so we'll be substituting, my motion is to substitute item 8E for item 8A and eliminate item 8A.
And I'll second that motion. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second that motion. Any further comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. I'm not gonna try to pronounce this lady's last name, but if you will, someone, Ms. York. Thank you. I'm gonna ask you to appear and pronounce your last name, please.
Yes, sir. It's Bettina Akukwe.
Thank you. I knew I'd mess it up.
Don't worry about it, please.
Thank you. Today, we have the privilege and honor of having a proclamation regarding the National Apprenticeship Week. I'm going to ask you to read this.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Alamance County Board of Commissioners.
And go to the microphone, please.
Alamance County Board of Commissioners Proclamation, National Apprenticeship Week, November 13th, 2023 to November 19th, 2023. Whereas National Apprenticeship Week is celebrating its 9th anniversary of raising awareness of the vital role registered apprenticeships provide in creating opportunities by allowing apprentices to earn while they learn and prepare a pathway to good, quality jobs and well-paying careers in Alamance County and across the nation. And whereas registered apprenticeship programs enable employers to develop and train their future workforce while offering career seekers affordable paths to secure high-paying jobs. And whereas Alamance County recognizes the role of registered apprenticeship in expanding opportunities in our workforce that are inclusive of individuals who have been historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by persistent poverty and inequality, thus providing a path for all qualified individuals, including women, youth, people of color, rural communities, justice-involved individuals, and individuals with disabilities to become apprentices and contribute to America's industries. And whereas Alamance County recognizes that a registered apprenticeship, a proven and industry-driven training model, is a key strategy to improving job quality and creating access to good-paying, family-sustaining jobs for all, starting with youth and young adults, while addressing some of our nation's pressing workforce challenges, such as rebuilding our country's infrastructure, addressing critical supply chain demands, supporting a clean energy workforce, modernizing our cybersecurity response, and responding to care economy issues. And now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Alamance County Board of Commissioners, do hereby proclaim November 13th, 2023 through November 19th, 2023 as National Apprenticeship Week in Alamance County. I want to thank you all for signing this proclamation.
And it's previously been signed by me, and by our clerk, and we appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
In law offices, we call them interns instead of apprentices.
Yes.
So, and we use them a lot. And their background does not make that much difference, but what they accomplish and achieve is tremendous.
It is. And I just want to note, on a side note, that we have over 50 employers in Alamance County participating in apprenticeships.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And that is your copy.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, Mr. Joyce, you are our only speaker.
Yeah, maybe that's getting to be normal. I got 3 minutes, so I'm gonna have to go fast, okay? Because I can't take this, what happened in 5 years in 3 minutes, but I'm gonna do my best. Okay, this is concerning what you made a decision on at your last meeting, the bond referendum. Okay, in January of 2019, ACC came to the commissioners and said that they needed $10.4 million, okay, to build a training facility. It was supposed to be for law enforcement, fire service, EMS training, an indoor firing range, and a driving course. $10.4 million, okay? This thing was supposed to be done by 2022, okay? The inflation rate in 2020 was 1.4. Inflation rate March 2021, which was when they were supposed to dig ground, was 1.7. So it totaled with interest, and interest is probably a little high because these bonds are sold in increments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So with the total of $10.2 million and the interest at 20 years would be $13,104,000, okay? Now, let's go to when it actually happened. The bond issuance on October 31st was $15 million at 4.25% interest. The bond issue, if you did it when they said they were going to do it, was 1 1/3. Okay, so the interest rate's 3 times as high. The premium received from ACC in 2021 was $3 million at 1.3%. The capital reserves that you said you were going to take in the last meeting from ACC was $3.5 million. The state gave you $5 million for the shooting range, which was already included in the first presentation. There was no state money. The board, the coupon rate is 4% plus you paid 1/4% because you'd taken premium again. So the total cost was $38,300,000 now versus $13,104,000. Look, America doesn't reward failure, okay? This is a failure on the part of the president of community college, a failure on the part of the board of trustees, and a failure on the part of the county commissioners for approving something like this. This should have been put off. I know it's done, but we're going to let the public know that this should have been put off. It should have been held, stopped. It was a want. It wasn't a need. If it had been a need, it would have been done 5 years ago. And this has got to stop. And this just keeps happening. This is a 100%, in my opinion, a political decision. It has nothing to do with a need or a want. A need is something you got to have right now. A want's something you wish list. And this has got to stop, guys. We just keep doing this over and over again. And this is totally a political decision. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next is the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second. Is there any comment concerning the consent agenda? I see thinking going on, but
I do have one question on my consent agenda, and I think it's pretty easy to answer, because it's about the Chamber of Commerce. I know we're about to reissue another contract with them, and I could not find what we were actually, what that payment was. I think it's $125,000, but I could not find it.
That is the amount of our annual contract with them. What number is that? I'm not seeing that right. 6B.
6B, correct.
Oh, that's a different.
It's just a clarification.
Yeah,
It's
this
not,
is a different agreement than
Okay.
annual 125.
that's why I
So
couldn't
this is
find
for
it.
our workforce development collaboration that we get funding from the state.
Mhm.
And then it's administered through ACC, through the Workforce Development Initiative.
Right.
And the amount on this one, I actually don't see that. but 875,000 is what staff is saying. I'm sorry, I just pulled up the summary sheet.
And we have spoke about this before, haven't we? About this, is it connected to the survey?
So this was a state appropriation?
and there is
That
no
we
local
received.
match.
Right.
Yes.
No
So
worries.
This just extends the life of that contract.
Thank you very much. I just couldn't find the numbers. That's why I asked about it. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
and I'm
good
good.
question. I couldn't find
Thank
it
you.
either right now.
No worries. Thank you very much for your help.
Any other comments? All in favor of the consent agenda indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay. We now have a public hearing. Do we have a motion to enter the public hearing? This is to, public hearing proposed for the amendment of the, UDO, or the Uniform Development Ordinance related to the planning board and the Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Ms. York,
Yeah, I'd
okay,
be happy to
Second.
introduce the item.
we have a
Yeah.
motion and a second. Prior to the vote, do you want to say anything regarding this matter?
I'd be happy to introduce the item, tell you a little bit about why we have this before you, and then if you'll want to conduct the public hearing, hear from anyone who signed up to speak, close the public hearing, and then it'll come back before the board for a decision. Are you ready for me to introduce it?
Yes.
Okay. So we've discussed this a little bit. This is an opportunity for us to make some changes related to your planning board and your board of adjustment. And the process in which to do that is to adopt a text amendment to the Uniform Development Ordinance. So that would be to change the size of the current planning board. You know, that's 13 members right now. And then we're also asking that you would consider to appoint a special separate Board of Adjustment. Right now, the Board of Commissioners serves as a Board of Adjustment, and best practices, consulting with other places and School of Government suggests that some of the types of decisions that a Board of Adjustment makes could potentially be in conflict with the role of commissioner and constituents. So it's a quasi-judicial process that the Board of Adjustment works through. They consider variances, and we think that as we continue to grow and our planning needs continue to expand, that there are going to be increased demands for this Board of Adjustment to have more and more hearings. So we have a unique opportunity right now. We have, in our current planning board, there are, as I mentioned, 13 members. 5 of the members' terms are expiring in December, and so that leaves a remaining 7 members. So we would like for you to consider a text amendment that would reduce the size of the planning board down to 7 members, and for you to consider appointing, and you don't have to make the appointments today, but consider moving the other 5 previous planning board members to sit as your first separate Board of Adjustment. They would be the ones who would consider the variances and would handle the quasi-judicial nature of those needs. So that's what's before you today. Happy to walk through the various amendments within the Uniform Development Ordinance, or or just give you the
Before you
highlights
do
of
that,
those.
let's, want to acknowledge our new planning director is present.
Yes.
Matthew, would you please stand and tell everyone who you are?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Paisley. So for those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Matthew Hoagland. I've been in the job now for a month and a day, started in early October, and I'm truly honored to be here. I live in Caswell County, and I served as Caswell County's planning director for the past 5 years. But again, truly honored to be an Alamance County employee, and certainly happy to answer any technical questions you might have about this matter.
Okay, board, I'm gonna suggest that we, open the public hearing at this point. And then, Ms. York will get further explanation
That sounds great.
afterwards, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
And a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. We are now in the public hearing. Is there anyone on this side that would like to have any comments pertaining to this change? Anyone on this side? Do we have anybody on Zoom that's contacted us? Do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, we're out of the public hearing. At this point, this item is 7A. You have that in your packet. You have actually what the changes and so forth would be, and they're outlined in that packet. For those of you that don't have packets, they're always available online, usually by the preceding Thursday of our meetings. And this was likewise posted, so everybody that wanted to see it could have and hopefully has seen it. Okay, Ms. York, I'm gonna turn it back over to you, please.
Okay, thanks. As you mentioned in your packet, I have a memo from your planning director. He has previewed this with the current planning board members, so they are aware that you are considering this change, and they seem favorable to those that are in expired terms to moving to lead the new Board of Adjustment. And then following that are the proposed amendments that we'd like your consideration on. They're in a strike-through version so that you're able to see exactly what language changes we're asking you to make this morning. And I do have one clarification that I wanted to also squeeze in there if it's not too much trouble. On page 4 of 6 of that document, under section 2.3.3 procedures, we left out of section A, it's talking about what necessitates a quorum, and we forgot to say in accordance with general statute. So it's right in the middle. The sentence starts with, for the purposes of this subsection, vacant positions on the board and members who are disqualified from voting on a quasi-judicial matter should say in accordance with general statute 160D-109D. So if we could insert that as one of the amendments. Happy to talk through this in more detail, but I think you've got the gist of it in terms of what we're looking to do. The reduction of the planning board down to 7 members and the creation of the separate Board of Adjustment.
And I would indicate that I'm a quasi-judicial member of the planning board, meaning that I attend all the meetings, but I don't get to vote.
It would be an ex officio member.
I'm sorry, thank you. And so consequently, it was mentioned and brought up and discussed in the last planning board meeting. We heard 0 objections or concerns from any of the then existing 13 members on the planning board. In fact, the chairman and a couple of the others were very appreciative and praised, and we're looking forward to this change. Even the ones going off, because I think at least one or more want to be placed on the new board, and that would be a consideration that we commissioners would have in the future. I don't think we need to do that today. but that would be something that we would do in the near future.
That's correct. So once we have the text amendments adopted today, we would ask that you would just direct staff to advertise for the vacant positions. And then we would bring that back to you at a future meeting to make the official appointments to the Board of Adjustment, as well as the Planning Board. If there are any changes that you'd like to make, then you certainly have that opportunity.
But I do understand that the 7 non-expiring members would continue on as the continuation of the 7-member planning board.
That is our understanding, although you're, of course, able to appoint somebody different should the board choose to do so.
Have you got, Matthew, do you have a list of the 7 members that would be remaining?
I have that list.
All right.
We've actually had a couple other folks drop off for reasons of attrition
Right.
unrelated to their terms expiring. So we're actually down to 5 people remaining. The folks with remaining time on the terms are Anthony Pierce, Bill Poe, Troy Willoughby, Stephen Dotson, and Ernest Baer.
All right. And you've got a couple of members, at least Julian Doby has moved,
Right.
so that's why he's not being continued. And who was the 7th member?
Oh. What a quiz you provided me with today.
Is Rodney Cheek not still on?
You're Rodney and Ray? Ray Cole?
So Rodney's term is expiring, he would be eligible for reappointment, but these are the folks that still have time on their terms. It's down to 5. So there are a number of folks, Amy Perkins, Sandy Ellington Graves, Blake Cobb, their terms are expiring, but they are eligible for reappointment this year.
Board, we need to, I would suggest we pass this as our new procedure, setting up both the new board and this reduction in numbers for this board. But I'm going to suggest that we not appoint either the existing 7 members and/or the new adjustment board until our next meeting. That'll give us time to look at all the names and consider them and then decide what we choose to do. And I'll make a motion to that effect.
Second, and we don't have a request to appoint them anyway, so.
Right, we would like the opportunity to advertise for those positions, which is your standard procedure. And then will probably be December by the time we're able to get the applications and bring back those candidates for you.
Then I will amend my motion
Is that what you were
to
thinking of?
the meeting, or one of the meetings in December, for consideration of those appointments as opposed to our next meeting in November.
Okay,
Mr. Carter?
I'll
would you-
amend my second.
Thank you.
Just, excuse me, just a quick
yeah.
question. What brought all this to mind? What was the reason
Well,
behind the change?
I think there have been some challenges having 13 members in terms of achieving a quorum and the logistics of trying to have everybody be heard at those meetings. They've gone on pretty lengthy. And so we started looking at other counties and the sizes of theirs, and we didn't have other counties with 13-member planning boards. So we were kind of an anomaly out there. So then when we had 5 members who were going, whose terms were about to be up, we thought, well, this is a great time to at least look at this and consider if this is a change that the Board of Commissioners would like to make. So we're hoping it'll improve some efficiency, and we also wanted to take the opportunity to create this separate Board of Adjustment as a best practice to let the commissioners not perform that quasi-judicial function. as
Do
well.
other counties not, commissioners not perform that?
Correct. Other counties have a separate Board of Adjustment.
I'm not saying we have to be like anybody else, I'm just comparing to.
Sure. So there would still be ex officio member of the county commissioners on both the planning board and Board of Adjustment. And when we bring back the recommendations for appointment, you would also could consider appointing alternates on that Board of Adjustment, because you do have to have all of those members present in order for them to take action.
And I likewise have seen that during the planning board meetings, and particularly the challenge with 13 members having a quorum. So I'm very much in favor of this. Does the planning board director have any comments?
Yeah, Matthew, do you have anything?
I think the county manager summed it up perfectly. Again, with regards to creating an independent board of adjustment, you know, quasi-judicial decision-making is obviously very separate from legislative decision-making. So the vast majority of counties and municipalities throughout North Carolina have that independent board of adjustment, which is separate from the governing board.
Yes, sir.
Couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any problems with this in principle. I have some questions about the particulars. So first of all, make sure my understanding is correct. The planning board is an advisory board that provides advice to the county commissioners to make a decision, right?
That's correct.
A board of adjustment actually affects citizens' rights.
That is correct.
Rights to develop property if for a variance. Those decisions don't get appealed to us, but to Superior Court.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you for pointing that out.
I understand this proposal creates 3 alternates for the Board of Adjustment. I don't, so a 5-member board with 3 alternates, I don't quite understand the need for
For 3.
alternates and I just want to understand that better.
Okay, Matthew, do you want to address that?
Yes, ma'am.
If
Thank
you
you.
don't mind coming up to the microphone, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So, really, in essence, you can think of a board of adjustment almost as a jury, the way that a jury sits. And they hear these types of quasi-judicial cases and have to decide based on an evidentiary hearing and the black and white nature of the facts before them. Let's say that you have a board member with a fixed opinion on the issue, or they may be the next door neighbor of someone who is petitioning for a variance or an appeal. And so they have been exposed to facts and evidence related to the property, or they have a fixed opinion about their neighbor. They would need to recuse themselves from that vote. And so in that instance, an alternate would step in. So you have a 5-member board of adjustment. You may appoint up to 5 alternate members. Obviously, a situation in which you would have 5 recusals and then a need for 5 alternates would be exceedingly rare. So it's really at the board's discretion. You could do 2, 3, 4, 5 alternates. The alternates really just come in those extenuating circumstances when you have a conflict of interest or a regular board member has to recuse themselves for any reason.
And who determines when to pull an alternate in?
That's an excellent question. So ideally, when the issues come before the Board of Adjustment and the agenda packets go out and the facts of the case are presented to both the petitioner and to the board member may raise their own hand and say, I have prior knowledge or a fixed opinion on this issue, and so I'm going to recuse myself. You also have the opportunity where the other Board of Adjustment members can bring that up at the meeting and say, hey, you know, Bob, weren't you involved in this development 10, 15, whatever years ago? Do you feel like you have a conflict of interest? So the other board members can bring that up as well and vote on the conflict of interest, have that member recuse, and then the alternate would step in.
Which I think is a fine process. My concern about having, and I think there's probably a need for an alternate for conflict of interest purposes, but my concern about having more than one is that the choice of which alternate to bring in could be outcome determinative.
Yeah.
Just like in jury selection, I mean, yeah, there are certain people I want on the jury and certain people I don't. That could come into play, and so that's my concern
Sure.
about having a ton of alternates, or even more than one.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I think that's a valid concern. I would imagine that in a situation like that, probably the best case would be to address that in the Board of Adjustment's bylaws, where maybe the alternates are assigned a number, and so you know, it just runs in turn. So the first need for a vacancy or the first need for a substitution would be alternate 1, regardless of the case. And then once alternate 1 has had their turn, alternate 2 goes in, for example. So I think it's an excellent point, and I think as the board constructs those bylaws, we can just be careful about outlining that process so we have a wise delegation of when the alternates are needed.
I'm not seeing it naming 3 alternates. I think the language is just reading may appoint alternate members to serve on the Board of
I
Adjustment.
thought I saw 3 in the
I think it's the
recommendation.
section before that is talking about their terms of
3-year
3
terms.
years.
Okay.
But the alternates is left vague enough to give you discretion in terms of how many alternate members you'd like to have available.
Will the Board of Commissioners approve their bylaws?
Yes, ultimately,
Like I said,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. My other concern is going from 13 to 7 is pretty significant cut. 13 may be a bit unwieldy, but it also allows more input. So I'm wondering if some number between that 13 and 7 might be more appropriate. Have we given any thought to a different number?
Yeah, in the memo, you can see some of the other counties that we looked at. We chose to highlight the counties that were comparable to Alamance in terms of population, not having county-wide zoning similar to us, or were geographically adjacent to us or nearby. And so there are some other sizes there. 7 worked well for us because we had 5 who were going off. So we thought it took away some of the opportunity for potential conflict there with those terms. But certainly if the board would like to choose a different size board, you could.
Thank you.
Just a question, and it's just my opinion. So this, whenever we've had all these hearings and all this stuff before, we've always had folks to call us to tell us what's going on because we work for them. We're elected to be their voice. Is this removing us from this whole process?
We haven't had a lot of quasi-judicial hearings with this board. So that's something different. That's
Okay.
when you're not allowed to have communication
Okay,
on an item with constituents at all. You're not allowed to
Okay.
be swayed one way or another. So we've not done a lot of those type of hearings. We just haven't had requests for variances, but we do feel like that's
okay.
coming soon. So in terms of other public hearings, it would be absolutely appropriate that you're having those types of communications from citizens and could consider. But when you have a quasi-judicial, that is not allowed to have constituent input.
Okay, and if there's ever zoning before I die in my mid-90s, is this going to change, this procedure? Will that affect that whatsoever?
You would still have
Okay.
a board of adjustment and a planning board, and all matters would still go through the same
Okay,
uniform development
Sounds good.
ordinance guidelines.
Just to be clear, the Board of Adjustment, the whole point of it is to hear requests for variance based on the regulations we already have in place. So the board's role is to set the regulations, and the Board of Adjustment is actually the one that would hear individuals who might think that their property qualifies for a variance based on the rules that you guys set. So that's why there's kind of a two-part process. The board wouldn't lose any authority to develop those regulations. These are just the requests for people that think, hey, my property's different, or I need an exception to the rule.
okay.
Yeah.
Just when people are watching and they may not be schooled in this and they may
Right.
not know anything about it, I just think it's real important that we over-explain it sometimes. And, because I don't ever want anybody to ever lose their voice, because I'm seeing that happen across my country a lot, and I don't want that to happen in this county.
Right, you guys still set the rules. This board is just the one that decides when somebody qualifies for an exception to the rule.
Okay, just
Yeah.
checking,
Yeah.
just checking. Okay, I'm good. Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Lashman,
I have no questions.
I don't have any more questions.
Mr. Turner, any other questions? No, thank you. The reason I like this Board of Adjustment particularly is typically, Ms. Thompson, when they make the call, the citizen makes the call to us, we're so deep into it that we've already disqualified ourselves, because we have information that we would have otherwise had to make a decision upon. And we don't realize that entering the conversation. So I think this helps us as commissioners, but also helps the population. Any other comments? I'm gonna ask that we approve this procedure, an adjustment and the addition of adding the Board of Adjustment as presented to us. Mr. Turner, do you wanna make an adjustment as to the number of members?
I could accept 9.
I'm good with that. And I'm good with one alternative, one alternate. No more,
I could support that.
because what you said is exactly what would happen.
Yeah.
Let me remind you that at this point, you can only have 2 appointees on either board from one precinct, and I think that's a positive. But we have, what is it, 32 precincts now? Is there some
38.
38, whatever it is, a large number.
This is actually based on the township, not the
Right.
precinct.
Township, all right,
Based on
thank you.
townships,
Yeah.
yes.
And how many townships do we have?
13?
13.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
13,
1,
which
3.
was, I think, the original
reason why.
logic of the 13 members.
One from each?
I think that was what the intention was, and that is not what
Well,
was
that's-
played out.
That's not totally straight up, I think, correct me
Oh,
if I'm
okay.
wrong.
May have
It's
missed-
13 in the county, but you have many, many more in municipalities. So I think it's something like, it's a much larger number than that. And there, you can be in a city and still be on one of these boards. If I'm wrong.
I think that's right. I think there's 13 townships that are wholly or largely in the county and not inside a municipal area.
Correct.
That seems to represent most of the representation that we get on the planning board, right? People get on the county planning board because they want to influence the development of the county outside of municipalities. So that's been where we've been, and I think the policy has been no more than 2 from one township, but it's not required that there be 1 for each township, if
That's
that makes
correct.
sense.
That is
Yes.
correct.
If we go with one alternate, if we limit it to one alternate, would that alternate then have to be from a separate township from the other members of the board?
I think we're blending two things. So the
Correct.
alternate's gonna be on the Board of Adjustment.
That's what I'm saying.
We're talking about planning board has a requirement at this point that there be no more than 2 per township.
So in the.
Board of
Board
Adjustment
of
does not.
Adjustments doesn't have a requirement for location.
It does not.
It does not at
Okay.
this point.
Mr. Chairman, would you amend your motion for 9 members of the planning board and 1 alternate member of the Board of Adjustment?
I would do that, Mr. Carter, I think you made the second.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right. So currently, it's as presented, except it would be 9 members of the planning board and 1 alternate to the Board of Adjustment. Is that correct?
Yes,
All right.
So 5 members of the Board of Adjustments with 1 alternate?
correct.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've got a question.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt. I just want to make one other technical comment regarding alternates and the operations of the Board of Adjustment. So the Board of Adjustment hears variances in addition to appeals and other quasi-judicial issues. State law requires with a variance, the burden of proof is more extensive than a standard issue. So it actually requires a 4/5 majority of the Board of Adjustment. So obviously, the discretion for alternates is up to the Board of Commissioners. But if you did have a situation where you had recusals and your alternate came in and maybe you only had 1, and for whatever reason you had a 4-member body hearing a variance, then the burden would be a unanimous vote in that 4-person instance as opposed to a 4/5 vote if you had a full complement of board members. So just a little additional information on that one.
Yeah, I think that's what was giving me a little bit of heartburn over trying to limit it to 1 alternate. You get yourself in a position where you may not have enough people to show up to have the vote. I'd make a suggestion we amend that to at least 2 alternates.
Mr. Turner, can we,
Not interested.
Beg your pardon?
I'm not interested in 2 alternates. I'm just interested in 1. And if it's 4/5, you gotta have the majority. My question would be, in that scenario that you laid out, could the Board of Adjustment say, we don't have enough people to make this vote, can you come back the next time and let's take it up then?
Yes, sir. If for whatever reason the board can't conduct its business, then obviously the agenda items would just move to the
Forward.
next month's
Okay,
meeting.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
as a compromise, may I suggest that we have a alternate 1 and alternate 2, and designate them as 1 and 2, with the authority going first to alternate 1 as opposed to alternate 2. It takes 3 votes, so we don't have to have an agreement, but I would love to have an agreement on this. Mr. Lashley, would you consider such?
Well, what I'm trying to do is what Mr. Turner laid out is what I think would happen, is you would get outcome-based person chosen to be the alternate on this particular case. With just one alternate, there's none of that. There's none of that. Everybody knows who it is. It can't be changed. And if you got two, you're right back to what Mr. Commissioner Turner was saying, that what could possibly occur in these places where, hey, they just handpick the person who's going to support their idea. With the one alternate, it's pretty much cut and dry.
Let me ask Mr. Stevens as our legal attorney, alternate one with priority, then alternate one would have to have a conflict in order to go to alternate two. Is that correct?
Based on the way you're describing it, I think that's correct. And based on Mr. Lashley's question about being able to move the item, that would certainly solve a situation where there's only so many board members available because of some conflict of schedule. That wouldn't necessarily solve a problem of a conflict of interest. So if you had multiple members of the board, let's say 2 members of a 5-member board that are conflicted out because they live on either side of the person requesting a variance, and now you only have 4 possible members, then Mr. Hoagland's point is well made. You now have a situation where you have 4 people sitting to hear the item, and the burden is on the appellant to say that, hey, I've got to get all 4 of these people to side with me. And that's a big burden. Ordinarily, you'd have the ability to have at least one person vote in the alternate and still be successful. So having a unanimous vote might be a difficult burden. So I can see the logic of having more than one. I think Mr. Turner's point is well made. But if there is a schedule and we know that, hey, alternate one is up for these months of the year, or they're up first until they hear something and then they rotate out, I think that might fix the conflict.
Additionally, not just being a neighbor, but that alternate may have been lobbied and already have made up his or her mind in advance and therefore not eligible to make the decision.
That's right. Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of, I don't want to say coaching, but coaching on the front end with this new board, because they're going to be sitting and hearing these things dispassionately. They don't have the ability to be moved by what they ordinarily think about an issue or what somebody's told them about an issue. They have to consider the facts presented to them at the hearing, just like a judge and a jury would consider those facts. So it's a little different than how we normally do business. We want to make sure they're coached on that up front.
Did you have all these issues and burdens and lobbying and stuff before you thought about these 5 people? I'm just curious. Alternates have just shot us to the moon. I mean, never mind. It's just get conflict. We can't, and these 5 know that they can have no feelings whatsoever.
We don't know who they are yet.
We're
but-
gonna be working with
Are they
them.
going to be from the United States of America?
They must reside in
Okay.
Alabama County.
Good luck with your feelings.
And I guess my question would be, how are you going to go about choosing these folks? Is it going to be an application process?
Yes.
Right.
So
And we, the
your rules-
commissioners, approve.
Yeah, your rules of procedure require advertising and appointment by the board, so we will bring that back at a future meeting. You can choose the alternates then, you don't have to even choose the number right now, because the way that it's in the text amendment right now is just the possibility of alternate.
Okay. So I have some time to think about
You have some time.
thinking and
If
bringing
you'd
in
like,
a second
Unless you'd like to
Now, will
specifically.
we be able to choose the alternates, or will the Board of Adjustments choose the alternates?
The Board of Commissioners would choose the alternate.
Okay. So I have some time
Might
to
I
think about this?
excuse me.
I got the next
Unless you
meeting?
want to specify a number, the way that we have proposed it, it does not specify a number of alternates. So we could move on if we're not ready to make that decision.
I'd like to think about this for a little bit.
Sure.
I'd like to run it through a crazy math scenario to see what my options are. If that's okay with the board.
So we could still have an adoption of the text amendments as written, with the exception of Commissioner Turner's change for 7 members going to 9 members on the planning board. That would need to be amended in the vote to make these text amendments.
And
be
I
able to
think my
adopt them.
amended motion is for 9 members, and the second agreed with that. So I think that's what is before us.
But we
And
have one alternate.
And so at this point, we have alternates, the S in paren, because it's not been determined. And we can determine that in the future, is that correct?
That is what I'm recommending. Rick, are you okay with that?
Yeah,
The
that makes
language
sense to
may
me.
appoint alternate members.
At a later time.
And decide the number.
So right now it's just 9 members and we haven't put an alternate on there yet.
There is no alternate for planning board.
Sorry.
Board of
The Board of
Adjustment would be
Adjustment's
5
sorry.
members with an undisclosed amount of alternates.
Understood. Apologize for the confusion.
Yep.
Just wanting to make sure we're all on the same page.
Any
9
further
and 5
discussion?
plus.
So we now have 9 planning board members. We have 5 Board of Adjustment with 1 or more alternates to be determined in the future.
I'll amend my second to that.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
And Matthew, congratulations, I think.
Like a Board of Adjustment member, I am dispassionate about this. I work at the direction of the board, so thank you.
But you were the first one to say 13. When he asked you about townships, you said
ma'am.
13 first. That's
one of the first things
impressive.
I learned about the
First day in here, that's cool.
Very nice.
Okay, the next is the Chamber of Commerce.
Commissioners, this is the quarterly report that's required based on the contract that we have with the Chamber for Economic Development Activities. So Reagan is here to kick that off for us.
Hi, good morning, Chair Paisley, Commissioners. It's a delight to be with you. I'm Reagan Grill, President and CEO of the Alamance Chamber, and we are continuously proud of the economic development services that we provide on behalf of Alamance County, ranging from small business and entrepreneurial development to existing industry to industrial recruitment to workforce development. It's always an honor to represent Alamance County. With that, I invite David Putnam, Senior Director of Economic Development with the Chamber, to come forward and share some of those updates with you.
Good morning.
Good
Morning,
morning,
David.
Commissioners. Really appreciate the opportunity to present before you all and the public of Alamance County. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go through what I expect the agenda to be and see if that's acceptable to you all. So in the presentation, I'll cover 5-year performance of industrial recruitment and expansion activities. We'll discuss project activities to date in this performance period of March 1st, 2023 to September 30, 2023. Similarly, using that performance timeline, we'll look at inquiry needs and forecasts from interested projects, as we would call them, and then finally close it out with a product snapshot of Alamance County, product being what do we have available to market to these industrial expansion recruitment opportunities. So with that, we'll kick it off. So what you're seeing here is the list of the 5-year performance based on the industries that have announced their location expansion in Alamance County, in addition to chamber support that helped them do that. So you'll see a lot of similar names here. As to last time, I think we closed out with Revere Copper and Labcorp as the most recent announcements at the conclusion of last meeting. Now we've got 2 more exciting announcements, including Alliance MOCVD, which I pronounce Alliance Mockvid. It's a little, rolls off the tongue a little bit better. And then Cintas had a recent expansion in the city of Graham. That is publicly, they've announced that that's produced about 100 jobs. So we're very excited about that. Just quickly from this sheet, you know, one thing that's important to note is Honda Power Equipment is there listed up at the top as an expansion. That's still the case. They've gone through a name change. It's now Honda North Carolina Manufacturing, which is, you know, we feel like is an exciting name change that adapts and adopts the recent announcement they made of taking ATV production, some ATV production from South Carolina and moving it to the facility here in Swepsonville, which they've made a tremendous amount of investments in already. And That's a legacy project way outside the scope of 5 years, but to date, I think in an article they said that number has amounted to $380 million that they've invested in that facility. So that's a huge investment that's not captured on this. It just shows the rippling benefit of these types of projects and what we announced, the induced, the indirect benefits, because what you're seeing before you is just the direct benefits of these project announcements. Another thing I'd like to highlight is overall this 5-year performance amounts to $739,500,000 of capital investment and 1,445 jobs for Alamance County. So another big metric across those 10 recruitment projects and 9 expansion projects. I'm going to brag a little bit about Alliance Machvid. This is a very cool company that decided to locate to Central Carolina Industrial Center in Mebane, North Carolina. Their 2023 Power Partner Award, and that's an award nominated by their customers. So it's very meaningful to receive that award. And they're also a recently announced semiconductor foundry, which there's been a lot of talks about semiconductors in the United States and how are we diversifying our supply of semiconductors. Well, this is a great example of semiconductors in Alamance County. So what they do specifically is they design and manufacture film process equipment and specialize in metal organic chemical vapor deposition equipment, which is where the MOCVD acronym comes from. And they're a supplier of this equipment to vendors such as Wolfspeed, vendors such as Qorvo, all these other different big players in the semiconductor space. So we feel strongly that they're a tremendous asset for Alamance County. All right. So moving on, it's a little difficult to see, but I can go through the numbers with you all. So we have new active and site visit metrics across March to September of this year. So you can see we were pretty generally looking at new project inquiries, that blue line, pretty gradually 12, 13, 12, 14, 11, 14. Well, we shot up in September. We think it's after the summer rush. People are starting to get back in the groove of things. We entertained about 31 project inquiries, which is a tremendous amount of volume. That's almost one inquiry every day that was interested in Alamance County. Now, some of those are statewide searches, but they were coming looking at Alamance County specifically, too.
Excuse me, David, is that,
Yeah.
are we thinking that's tied to the announced expansion for the Toyota project?
So it could be. Certainly, we've seen some vendors that want to be near Toyota, want to be near VinFast, want to be near Wolfspeed, those types of projects. We've not seen the direct, like supplier industries,
Right.
the tier 2s or 3s, actually make landfall yet. So I think there's more of this volume to come. I
Wow.
think we'll continue to see this uptick. Truthfully, things that are holding folks back from investing and proceeding with their projects is there's a lot of uncertainty in the macro level of the economy, right? Like, our interest rate's going to go down. Where is everything going to be at over the next few years? And that has caused some kind of stallments. Also, some of these companies make decisions based off of federal legislation that they're waiting on guidance still from the Treasury. And so that can also cause a holdup in their decision-making process. So I think in terms of what's to come, we're going to continue to see this amount of volume probably over the next few years.
What did you say about interest rates?
Just in the event, are interest rates going to come down, or are they going to continue to rise? Because at the beginning of the year, we saw a lot of just project inquiries. They wanted to own their own land. They wanted to buy their own buildings. They didn't want to lease. Now, those dynamics are starting to shift. I think interest rates keep climbing. Folks are like, well, that's a lot of investment to just drop with so much uncertainty. And so projects and companies are more interested in leasing right now and partnering with developers, more so than we saw earlier this year. Yeah. So you can also see that, September was a busy month for us as well. We had 7 site visits, which, there's a lot of work that goes into those site visits. Oftentimes we have the clients, the state representatives, the community college representative that was just here before is a core partner of ours. And we're actively trying to recruit these projects as they come in, putting our best foot forward, showing them assets like the community college, things the commissioners have invested in and the greater Alamance County populace have invested in as a whole. So we had a good amount of activity for sure. And we're still entertaining a high number of active projects. That number is likely not a 7 right now. It's more so a 6 or a 5. We've not crunched our numbers quite yet. We use Salesforce as our tool for tracking these metrics, and since we just closed out October, we're looking to do that mid-November and updating that tool.
How many sites do we have available now?
That is a great question. So we'll look at that a little bit later, but I
Okay.
will tell you we've got 24 sites and 24 buildings, and I'll give you kind of the macro lens of what that all means and where we stay in a statewide competitive structure. So this slide really highlights project inquiry needs and forecasts. And so all those projects that blue line that I mentioned before, the new inquiries that we had, we'll solicit those leads from maybe it's the state, maybe it's some existing industry services that we provide, like site visits, a number of different leads that we generate. Well, of all those leads that we've generated, they came back with a forecasted projection of 31,339 jobs that they were looking at investing in Alamance County, and $23,889,095,000 worth of capital investment. Now, again, some of these project inquiries were statewide, right? And they were really specific to a certain type of product. Sometimes Alamance County didn't have that product to be able to offer them. So inherently we would miss out, but we're still going to respond. It's your job to confirm or deny the investment of projects in Alamance County. It's not our job. So we try and respond as frequently as possible to these projects so that we can give you all the opportunity to do that. But obviously sometimes we get looked over because the product doesn't meet, or the shoe doesn't meet the foot that they have, right? So, we've had project needs that have come in for 1,000 acres. And right now, Alamance County, we don't have a single site that complements 1,000 acres. So we're going to miss out on that project, right? But of course, all of the needs from that performance period, March to September, you'll see a macro level of need of around 4,494 acres. And then that's across close to 20 million, square feet of industrial space that they were looking for. Now, this is a product development slide, or a snapshot slide of what type of product we have currently in Alamance County, and we work with the state to make sure that this is, well, I say the state, when I reference the state, our core partner is the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Their acronym is EDPNC, and they're a private partnership institution that has an assemblage of state recruiters, site selector relationships, existing industry service providers, a whole bunch of different services. So we actively work to maintain our own property database that we can submit to projects for them to consider in Alamance County. And this is a snapshot of the Alamance County outline for those. So you can see of the active properties that we do have, there's a total square feet of 3,525,719. And so that is product that's, been proposed. We've got building plans or some other plans for them, and we feel like that's going to either come online or is online right now. And when I say online, I mean people can move in, or we see the structure going up, or it could just be plans on paper that have maybe a 12 to 18 month build time, but we have to be able to market those effectively to these projects in order for them to consider them. So you see some duplication, some buildings are also sites, and that's why you sometimes have total amount of acreage as 1,470 acres, is because there is a duplication, right? But among all of that, we've got 24 buildings and 24 sites. which is a good amount of product in Alamance County. You can see they're concentrated in areas that we would traditionally qualify as employment kind of zones, generally where we're pushing industries. And how we stack with that number of project needs, you know, we are still oversubscribed, but I feel like we are faring well compared to some of our statewide competitors and national competitors for that matter. So that was a whirlwind of information, but I'm happy to take any questions or clarify anything that I've said during my presentation.
Mr. Putnam, you mentioned we don't have the 1,000-acre spot for mega development. Do you know what our single largest tract is?
So we have some tracks little south of the airport that are around 200 acres.
Okay.
How many?
200.
Is that in close proximity to the Stereotech site?
Very close proximity to the Stereotech site. These sites are ones that have undergone other forms of due diligence. You know, they've had phase 1s, they've had phase 2s. They're being marketed, but there's, you know, they may face terrain difficulties, things like that. So it might be a 200-acre site.
Hilly.
What's that?
It's the topography is hilly.
Yeah, or it might have some, wetlands or rivers running through it and stuff. So could be a 200-acre site, but you might only be able to fit a handful of 100,000 square foot buildings on it, right? So, but we still have some nice sized sites.
And just as kind of a point of interest too, I have a friend on the Board of Commissioners in Randolph County, and he was telling me that with the initial announcement from Toyota, before the most recent bump from $6 billion to $14 billion, they were going to be able to seriously look at a significant decrease in the property tax rate because of the potential increase in tax revenue that would be coming from the Toyota operation. So that kind of the potential for that kind of an increase here is actually larger if you looked at the total of the interest than what they have with Toyota. Now, we obviously don't have capacity for all 31 of those visits, but would be a real, and the other piece of that too is you said not only a significant decrease in the property tax rate, but also an increase in their fund balance, which improves their bond rating. So those are all things that would be beneficial to the citizens of Alamance County if we could recruit some of these large operations into the county.
And if I can add a little note to that as well. So the General Assembly passed their budget. Within that budget was an appropriation to the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina to look at site development, new product development, and even things not focused exclusively on 1,000+ acres, but 500 acres, 200 acres, 100 acres, diversifying that product pipeline. Because, you know, we know that it's great to have a 1,000-acre site and recruit a Toyota, but is that a fit for every community? The answer is no, right?
Right.
And so we want to be strategic with the product that we're turning online. We want to be mindful that it's going to speak to the Alamance County's needs. And you guys are in the position to do that, which is why our partnership with you all is so great. And I'll add that one site at the base just below Saxapod, that's really a commercial property. So we do have some commercial listings on this as well. But that property is in Eli Whitney. It's maybe 2 acres. So you can see a lot of the product that we have available that's being marketed is along that 4085 corridor. It's really not stretched beyond there. We have a saying in the industry that, you know, if you don't have any product, you don't have a project, and that speaks very true. Because we have a ton of land north and south of the interstate, but we don't have utilities hooking up to it, power hooking up to it, sewer, water, all those other things that really make a project so special, or a property so special for industry interest.
And for future growth, that speaks to the need for a southern loop, infrastructure, transportation.
Infrastructure is a huge part of a company's decision to locate somewhere.
just to throw this out there, you're talking about farms. You better be careful, because we push so hard to preserve our farmlands and to work with people to keep that safe, and,
Absolutely.
just, you better watch it. That's all
Yeah.
I'm gonna say.
That's why we don't have any of those types of properties that we're marketing, because, you know, we're sensitive to that relationship as well.
I hope so, because we've been real sensitive to that with the PUV and everything else,
Yeah.
because they don't make land anymore. And I know generational farmers are kind of going away. A lot of our farmers are really retirement and older, and their kids have gone to college and they don't want to do that. They don't think they want to do that till years later.
Yeah.
And it's just very important that we have a balance here in Alamance County, and we just don't. We're Alamance County. We are nobody else. And we don't need to be like anybody else. We just need to take care of our families here and have a real balance, because sometimes you aren't so, you might get what you think you thought you wanted.
Yeah.
And it might not turn out to be that way.
That's right.
And I'm
if
not
I can-
anti-growth at all. I like that zoning thing, because I want to protect stuff, but at the same sense, I'm going to stand with that farmer.
Yeah, and if I can brag a little bit, we recently hosted our Economic Summit, which is a event that we host annually over at Elon University, and its feature was agriculture,
Good.
right? So that's one of the things we look at as economic development as well, is agriculture and farming, because it is so important,
Well,
right?
there's so many kids in this county think you make milk at Food Line, and it's a real shame, because they need to understand where it all. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding, and that's a real crime on us to not show our next generation of how it is and the reality of it, because we
Yeah.
see world hunger, and AI can't help us on that. So we'll see.
It's huge.
And we're laughing because that is such a true statement.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I ain't had a
Mr. Turner.
tasty computer chip lately, so just saying.
Quick, one more question, Mr. Putnam. A lot of underutilized, unutilized old textile mills in the county still, some of them being used for loss. But is there any interest in those spaces from some people you talk to? So not just building new, but reusing old?
Yeah. The answer is yes. There's a lot of interest in adaptive reuse, which would be converting those former textile mills that are dilapidated into something that's usable again. Is that exclusively for industry use, like industrial or heavy industrial? No. So we've had a lot of interest in redeveloping those former mills into things like multifamily housing, because we know housing is such a strain on Alamance County and the region and the state as a whole, right? But we do still have some properties, like Copeland Mill is one of the featured properties, and that is still being advertised for industrial use. And so we're looking at ways on how can we reactivate what is already there, because it's a tremendous asset to Alamance County, and it tells a story that, I mean, makes Alamance County, right? So it's meaningful to us. Mm-hmm.
Any other comments or questions? We thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right, item 8B is now off, and we're sorry that Kara's
8A.
under the
8A.
weather.
8A. We got
But
8B.
was 8A, we moved it to 8B.
8B.
And 8
not-
removed, 8B is still on.
8B is good.
8B is still on, 8A is one.
I understand. What was 8B?
Still
Because
8B.
it's still, no, that was the Kara's report on VIA. So we're skipping that. Does that go to our next meeting?
We'll coordinate with Kara to make sure that she's available for that meeting, but yes,
Alright.
it will be at a future meeting.
So now we have the revised 8B or C.
Thank you,
And
Chairman
we know who
Paisley.
you are, but would you state?
Sure, absolutely. My name's Donald Drews. I am with the Vice President of Behavioral Health and IDD Operations with VIA Health. And I always like to be here in Alamance County and talk with you guys. As I was sitting back listening to the Chamber speak, I'm glad they got to go before me. I started thinking a lot about the need to really continue to grow behavioral health supports in this county and the number of jobs that are being created. So I have to get with the Chamber and talk with them around, we can talk about how many jobs we've been able to create in the county around behavioral health and human services and really meeting the need around that. It was roughly about 2 years ago where we started sitting down with the county and talking about what the county's needs are, where they saw VIA stepping in and really supporting the county. And one of the foremost areas that kept coming up in all of those meetings was the need for a crisis diversion center, a hub of support in the county to keep individuals with mental health, substance abuse, out of your jails, out of the emergency rooms, supporting them in their local communities and making sure they were getting connected with the right services and supports as opposed to going with unmet needs, getting stuck in the judicial system or lost completely across the system. So I'm here to give you an update on where we're at with that. You charged us with moving that project forward, and I'm glad to say we are making progress. So it's a picture of your brand new crisis diversion center that's going up over on Kilpatrick Road. It's making lots of great progress. I think if you went over there today, I think they actually have the blacktop down now. So a little bit more going on there. The outside shell of the building is completely done, as you can see. Moving forward there, and really been focused on the internal upfit of the building. And that's part of my presentation today. So great progress on the building. Hope you're liking what you see there. To remind you, we're focusing on a couple of areas in that facility. Diversion from criminal justice system. We really been working really closely with all the municipalities and law enforcement around making sure when this facility goes operational, we got business processes and systems in place where we can divert people from the judicial system into those facilities and getting connected to services. Likewise, diversion from Alamance Regional Medical, talking with Cone Health around how they can make sure individuals access this facility as opposed to getting stuck in the emergency room. We're all horrified by the stories of an individual going in and needing help in an emergency room, and then 3 weeks later, they're still there, right? Sitting in an emergency room for 3 weeks is no place for your citizens or anyone else to recover when they have a mental health or they're dealing with addiction. And so getting them to the right place is critically important. So again, EMT, another diversion site. Diversion site is all about centralizing those services and supports. Back in the old days, if you've been in the system as long as me, everyone remembers that every county had their own area authority. It was like your DSS, and everybody knew that was the building you went to get your services. And when we all went through mental health reform in the state of North Carolina, everyone really lost. Like, well, where is that office at? And provider move offices regularly, right? They may get better lease agreement down the road, so they may close an office and move somewhere else, and somebody would think, oh, go to there. That office may be closed. And so really needed to create a central hub for services. So no matter where providers go, no matter what services are in there, to really have a person that can direct people to the right services and supports across the system. So we want to increase access to care. We really want to make that a centralized hub. We really want to work on the preventative side. Most individuals don't immediately go into crisis, right? You don't go from feeling a little depressed to being suicidal. There's a continuum along there where you continue that if you can get support earlier in that process, you can prevent a lot of crises in your community. And so creating a place where we can not only provide the crisis support, but a place where we can address the pending crisis is critical across the system. And that means somebody knows where to go to get that support when they're starting to feel like they might be in crisis earlier in that process. A couple other things that you're going to see with the expansion of this facility in your community is the expansion of 24-hour access, meaning we need to move to greater access across the system. People don't go into crisis, unfortunately, between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. We wish they did and make life easier for all of us, but that doesn't happen. So evenings, weekends, holidays, there's got to be a place that can operate that on a 24-hour basis. Specialized services to where when people get there, there's services that actually can support them. We have lots of providers in your community, and they all do certain things really well. But not everyone does everything. And so we need to create a place to where those specialized services can come to individuals versus everyone else having to go find where they need to go in the system. A peer living room model, you'll hear a little bit about that. That's really where people can drop in and get support from peers, right? You know, like you don't have to have an appointment or anything else. You can go to the peer living room. There's a fridge there. You can get you some water. You can sit down. You can get some materials. You can talk with someone and say, hey, you know, I'm not having the best of day today, and then you just need a little bit of support. So completely Obaxon peer living room model. A pharmacy on the site to make sure. The number one issue for most people going into crisis, unfortunately, is they can't get their meds, right? Or they don't have them. And so making sure they have timely access to medications, critical to that. Behavioral health urgent care, where we can work with people to get people dispositioned, because not everyone needs to be in a hospital setting. Not everyone needs to be in a certain facility. So to get some place where you can triage and you can evaluate and assess and actually figure out where they need to go is critical. And then lastly, we'll be lifting a facility-based crisis center in the facility, which is a 16-bed residential facility where people can stay for up to 2 weeks in that facility to be detoxed, to deal with their crisis, to get stable before they're released with the community supports they need to be successful. This is just a quick timeline that I threw in there. You have it in your packet. You can look at it as you go. But as you see there, we're getting into that phase through November and December here where we're really just working on the upfit of the building. So if you went over and you toured the building today, you would see lots of plumbing and electrical and stuff going into the interior, getting ready to get the walls up. We're waiting to get the elevator in the building. The elevator is the sore spot for us right now, getting that elevator in the building so we can work around it. Unfortunately, you can't put an elevator in later after you get everything done. You got to get that elevator in there first. And so that's being worked on. But we're really quickly getting to that finishing phase. And so you see as we get into the new year of 2024, we're going to be in that last, what I would call sprint run to finish the facility. And we're going to be talking about operational components of the building, making sure that everyone's on board around what are we going to do for security in the building with law enforcement. How is that going to work? One of the things we'll be coming back to commissioners are what are we going to call this building? What's going to be the name of the facility? What's going to be a good name to put out there, because we're going to market that all across the community. We'll probably put up some billboards in the community saying, hey, if you need help, this is where you need to go. So you want to make sure you get that naming down so you can create the name, because you don't want to put up billboards, put up a big sign on the building, put signs down the street, say, hey, if you're having a behavioral health crisis, please go here or call here. You don't want to do all that work and then change the name 6 weeks later, because then you just got to rebrand everything all over. So that branding's important, and so we'll want to come back to the commissioners when we get ready for that. That's probably somewhere at the beginning of the year that we're going to need to really talk about what are we calling this building so we can get bids out on that signage. And that's one thing I'll be going into here in a little bit around the bidding process and kind of where we're at. So that was all the great news. Some of the not so great news that we're working on is that like everything else, any other project you probably experienced or people have spoke with you guys about, costs have continued to rise across the system. And so I'm glad to report that the shell of the building, when we first moved forward on that, they were able to pre-purchase a lot of the equipment for the shell of the building, the exterior and all of that, and we came in exactly at our cost for that building, no increases at all in that. That was largely because we were able to move pretty quickly on the building, thanks to the commissioners and everything really green lighting that to move forward. So that was great. Unfortunately, as we moved to the upfit of the building, that's the interior components of the building, we did see cost increases across the building. You'll see some of in there. Our steel framing went up by about 30%, ceiling materials 17%. I won't read all of those to you, but some increases across the board. We compared those to industry standards of what they're seeing across not just North Carolina, but the country right now around construction, and that's roughly around a 27.8% increase across the system So pretty comparable for that. We were also able to cut some costs in a few areas, but there were some areas where we just couldn't avoid some of the costs because of the cost of labor and the cost of materials going into the facility. So overall, we're seeing across the total increase in the project is roughly going to be about $1.2 million for the interior. That will be amortized within the lease agreement of the facility for the property and for the county. And that will come out, as you see on the slide there, $127,800 a year to be amortized across the lease of that particular program for that. Our attorney will be working with the county's attorney on an updated MOU around the project and the additional costs of the county. And it's my understanding that will be presented at a future commissioner meeting for your review and consideration. And that's my update for today. Any questions?
Mr. Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roos, I appreciate you bringing up the naming, the issue about naming the building. I don't think Diversion Center has a meaning here in this room, and to law enforcement, I don't think it has a great meaning to those in need of services.
Great.
If you're approaching this from the position of a patient, you know, trying to understand how to name this thing, what happens in the building? Could you just kind of summarize
Sure.
the things that happen in the building?
Yeah, so if you want to look at it this way, it's almost an alternate to an emergency room for behavioral health. And so that behavioral health urgent care that we talked about component basically operates just like an emergency room does for a hospital. They bring people in, they assess, they evaluate, and just like how an emergency room has emergency beds, you know, in your emergency room, there's beds in the urgent care for these people to sit. And there's roughly, I think we have 8 beds slated in the facility where people can be triaged. And that's when somebody comes in crisis and they got a lot going on, sometimes you got to get them into a calmer place. You got to settle some things down. You got to figure out what's going on with them. Like, hey, are there some substances at play here that's causing this mania? What's going on? So it's really thinking of that as that emergency component. And once they determine like what the needs are there, then they're able to disposition within the facility. And that's where you got, hey, this person needs a longer stabilization. You know, like this person's not going to get stable over the next couple of hours and be able to go home with some supports. They're going to need to go to an inpatient bed for a week or two. And that's where they'll have actually those inpatient beds within the facility so they can transfer them there. There may be people that come in that say like, hey, this person is really acute. They got some comorbid medical condition going on here. Maybe they have seizures, and they really need to be in a medical facility. In those instances, they would triage and they would work to get a bed over at the hospital, and that's where that coordination with the hospital is so important. So crisis and emergency are really some keywords for their Commissioner Turner, what's going on. But the other piece outside of that crisis, in my mind, is the magic of the crisis. Support. So after that crisis, there's recovery groups going on in this facility for people with addiction as well as with mental health recovery. There's peer supports that's going out in the community that are checking on people in their homes, making sure they're taking their medications, providing nursing support in the community. If the family needs support, there's services that are going to go into these families' homes. It's going to connect them with social determinants of health, like maybe they don't have any food in the home, so it's going to connect them with food banks. Maybe they don't have any heating in their home. They're going to do that work too to connect them with social determinants. And so I want to say crisis is big, but that's just the front end part of what really goes into that long-term support and recovery.
You started that by saying it's an alternative to the ER for behavioral health.
Correct.
Do you include substance abuse in the behavioral health term?
Yes, we do. So when I say behavioral health, I mean mental health, substance abuse, and intellectual developmental disability. So this facility will be able to serve all of those adults or children. Now, we don't have any child beds in this facility for long term, but for that urgent wraparound crisis evaluation, they'll be able to serve children and adults for those 3 disability groups: mental health, substance abuse, intellectual developmental disability.
Ms. Roos, you might want to point out that there's a division between the children and the adult section.
Yes, yes. So the facility, as you see here, is the larger building. It will include those residential beds that I talked about and all of the crisis services in the two-story building. The one-story building on the far side there is reserved particularly just for children. And that's mainly outpatient and follow-up services. So a child may go into the crisis building if they're in crisis, but once they're dispossessed and stabilized, their ongoing services and supports will be in the smaller building, so they're not in the same building as adults that are maybe in crisis or unstable.
And they're very segregated so that the adults and the children don't commingle. Might want to indicate as well, 16 beds. If you go over 16 under state and federal law, you're now a hospital. We don't want to be a hospital.
Yeah,
So that's why the number 16 is so important.
Yeah, there's regulations that once you go over 16, you're considered an institution of mental disease, an IMD, under federal regulations, and that brings in all kinds of other potential barriers and adjustments.
Quick question for the county. This may be for another meeting, but are there sufficient funds in the opioid settlement payments to cover the additional lease request here?
We have about 1.7 million, I believe, in opioid funds that we've received to date. We are still working out whether or not, or what portion of those funds could be used to support the diversion center. Our understanding so far is that it would be more for service and program provision and not for infrastructure or lease payments on the facility. So right now, I'd have to say that's probably an unlikely source of funds to support these increased costs, but we do have some other maintenance of effort funds. I can't recall if there's any other sources we're looking at for those funds. So it would be an increase that we would see in your budget for next year.
Yeah, we'll talk about it for the next meeting. Absolutely.
Do you have any other
No,
questions?
thank you, Mr.
Ms. Thompson?
Okay. You and I have talked, and I want to know about security. I want to know if security's going to be 24/7 over there, because it might not be right now. And I need to know it's going to be 24/7, because that can be a very dangerous population that's going to walk in that door in crisis.
Yeah. So initially, our plan is that the county would help support security in that facility. I know that there's been some recent meetings with law enforcement where they were sort of taking a step back on whether law enforcement would do that 24/7, and whether that would be a county contribution, or whether we would have to bring in a private security firm to sort of fill in those gaps. That decision hasn't been completely finalized yet, but the goal is to have security there 24/7. We're hoping that the county and the municipalities of Alamance County will all contribute to that cost, so we do not have to use service dollars to pay for security, which isn't really a service, right? And so we're hoping the county municipalities will step in and fill all of those slots for us to have 24/7 security, but we do not have anything in writing from those municipalities yet.
Well, a patient doesn't come from one street in the county. It's all over the county,
Exactly.
so the whole county should support that. And
Agreed.
that's a must. That's got to be a must.
Yes.
The pharmacy, is that going to be contracted like a CVS, or how's that work?
It's basically going to be so don't consider this like somebody just walks in off the street.
Yeah.
Pharmacy is really a pharmacy, a clinical pharmacy that's just for the providers in that area, where they can send people, basically a Medicaid pharmacy for people with Medicaid. And so it'll probably be, there's a couple different ones out there. I think RHA is currently using Genoa in their pharmacy, and we'll probably continue with that contract, at least for now. Our long-term goal would be to explore other options for pharmacy, where we can try to bring in other options for uninsured medication costs. So free clinic type pharmacy, or in some areas where we've been able to work with non-for-profits to reclaim meds, like from nursing homes or other facilities that are just throwing those meds away. Working with somebody that can get licensed to do reclaimed meds to bring them to this facility so we can redistribute meds to people that can't really afford them or do not have Medicaid.
Okay, is DSS gonna be one of those folks on site?
DSS is one of them on our list. We do not have a complete agreement. At least I haven't been in the meeting. Sherry's shaking her head over there whether she's heard that. We've requested that they be one of the people on site to be part of that conversation. I haven't heard yet whether that staff is funded or how that's going to work yet. It's really important in this day and time because we have Medicaid expansion starting in less than a month.
Yeah.
And so our uninsured dollars in our system are very limited. And so we're putting a big push across all of our provider systems and our DSSs to say, hey, we need you to reevaluate all these people that are using state dollars to see if they qualify for Medicaid now, because that's where you start creating sustainability of programming. And so the more people we can qualify for Medicaid in this facility, the more services we can add into the program, which just continues to expand, right? What we can do there. The more uninsured people in there, the more we got to use state, federal, county dollars to try to support it. And so, yes, we'd love for the county to have DSS there to do those evaluations, qualify for people for Medicaid quickly, and get them moved into services faster.
And RHA, the Family Justice Center had to get someone to do their mental health crisis, like counseling and that kind of thing. Paige Holderman, I think it is, I met her. Are they going to be able to do all of that themselves, RHA? Because it's going to be like their home base, so to speak.
They're going to sort of, the way I like to consider these is when you're doing a mall, right? You go to the mall and you got a Belk and you got a Dillard's in the mall. They become your anchor stores. And then you have these other boutiques stores, your Foot Lockers and stuff that kind of fit in there to really support the overall mall. It's really what we're looking at here is RHA will be the anchor store, the anchor provider in the facility, and then we'll be looking to pull other specialty supports and services in to really fill that space out based on the needs of the community.
And just curious, are we getting a good response from various providers? Because this county's really loaded with people who do great things. Sometimes they don't even know about each other. But I'm just curious, are they going to be there full-time on site, or are they going to be there like a Tuesday every week or something like that?
Yeah, it's going to really depend on what the provider's doing and how they're delivering the services, right? Like, there's not going to be, you know, there's not space over here for every provider to just have their own office, right? And you just sit there 24/7. That's probably not even really efficient for their use of time. But we really want to look to see, like, hey, what do you do? And so maybe we have a provider that works really well doing, like, sex offender type work. And we need, that needs to happen twice a week. And we'll talk with them around using this conference space twice a week to maybe run a sex offender group or a recovery group within the space. So one, it makes their use of space. Maybe they don't have to have a bunch of offices around the community to do that. They can use centralized space that to some extent is paid for, right, within the lease agreement. RHA will be holding the main lease of the facility, so anybody we bring in next to that is really the icing on the cake, as opposed to having secondary, third, having like 5 or 6 different agencies, holding separate subleases to the facility.
And are you in with talks with ABSS and the other schools that, there's a lot of kids got a lot of stuff. A lot of kids went through a lot of stuff being out isolated with COVID. And that just doesn't get fixed the first day you get back in school.
Yeah.
Suicide rates are off the chart for young people. So I'm just curious, are you getting any kind of agreement with them to pick up their services that they may need?
Well, we don't have an agreement with them. We've had some conversations with them, and the school systems are really unique, right? There's this conversation happening with state DPI now, Department of Public Institute, around what we can do in the schools as far as the public sector behavioral health system and what the schools should be doing on their own as far as behavioral health. And so this would definitely be a referral source for schools coming out on their own. We're also talking about being able to push some services into the school. But it's an interesting time right now with how those schools are managing that. So we have an MOA with all of our school systems, And that the maintenance of agreement, talks about those pieces, and each county being a little different based on what's available in their communities, on what would be in that MOA. But as we move forward with Alamance County, this center would be in that MOA agreement, and it would talk about how they would refer and how they would access those services and supports as part of that agreement.
I went to the Guilford Diversion quote unquote center, and I went all over that place, and we went to one section where there were 3 children in there, and one of them was a girl. I think she was maybe about 9 or 10 years old, and the mom had just showed up and dropped her kid off and said, I can't do nothing with her. And she'd been basically staying there, and you mentioned about children. What happens with that? Because there's always that situation, as ugly as that is.
Yeah, the challenges with children right now in the system are incredible.
Yeah.
We have a lot of children that are very acute with a lot of unique needs. And since COVID, the number of residential treatment facilities for those children has dropped off by 40%. So there's high demand, low capacity in the system. And so those children are getting stuck at those points of crisis. And that's why you're hearing about kids getting stuck in emergency rooms, right? 'Cause they don't have anywhere to go. Or they're getting stuck on DSS couches because DSS takes custody of a kid, and then they can't find a bed anywhere in North Carolina for that child to go. And so that's where it's a two-pronged approach. This is the crisis part. We also have lots and lots of projects of expanding crisis beds for kids all over the system, to where we can try to create enough of those to where if a kid does go in the facility, we have some place to move them to. That process does not move quick through state licensure and other rules and regulations. And so hopefully as more capacity comes online, those issues won't be as significant, but we're probably still looking at, the next 18 to 24 months of really trying to get through bringing more capacity online before, we see really a drop in those issues.
Last thing, this is a really big commitment for a county to commit to this population, because you just don't fix it overnight. I wish you did, but you don't, with a lot of other things. And I just heard my county manager talk about these opioid settlement funds are about programming and like recovery courts. Never gonna stop talking about that. And all kind of peer support and things like that, because the building, just like church, does not fix that. You've got to have the programming, and I want to make sure we stay really dedicated to programming and not bricks, because people come and go in a building, but what we do with them and help them is everything. So
I couldn't agree with you more. I see this is really creating the infrastructure. The Chamber of Commerce really laid it down, is you really can't create jobs unless you have the infrastructure in your county to really support that. Gets in there with the crisis too, is there's only so much you can do with a storefront office building for behavioral health, right? They're not designed to really deal with somebody that's in acute crisis. And so if they're not, the only infrastructure your county has is an emergency department or your jails. And so it's really creating that infrastructure to where you actually can do the programming that you're talking about in a way that's meaningful and that's not fragmented in so many different places that people get frustrated with the system. I'll be the first one, I've been in the system a long time. The behavioral health system is very frustrating to navigate and to get what you want. And you would think it should be the easiest, right? When someone's in crisis, they cannot struggle to find out. It's why hospitals are so important. They're a beacon in your community. If you got a problem, everyone knows you go to the ED. If you ask probably most of your citizens, where do you go? If you're having a behavioral health crisis, they probably couldn't tell you.
Right.
Or they would tell you the ED. There really is no option. It's really creating the infrastructure to do what you're talking about, but I agree completely. To go to a building and there's nothing there, at the end of the day, doesn't get you where you need to either.
thanks, Don.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Lashley.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I have a question for the county first, just to refresh everyone's memory. When was the last MOU signed for this project?
Do you have that? Rick?
Yeah, it was last September.
So we'll say 9/20/22.
That's right.
So pretty much
A
12, 13 months ago.
Correct.
And what was the term of that lease? 10
So
years?
the term of the agreement was 10 years.
Just making sure everybody's on the same page. When does the AARP funds expire?
We are required to designate those funds by December of '24.
So we're inside 13 months for that. So, December of 2024. Now, I knew all these things. I just wanted to make sure that everybody else did too. I guess my question is, and I don't know if you can answer this. I'm not even sure if I should even ask you this question, but I'll put it out there. Because I've had people ask me the same question, so I think it's a valid question. When you sign an MOU with someone 13, 14 months ago for a direct amount of money, direct lease payment, how can the organization come back to you and demand $1.2 million? The way I look at it, if you didn't do your homework and you're $127,000 a year behind on your lease payment, you should swallow that. My county taxpayer shouldn't swallow it. We signed an agreement 13, 14 months ago for this amount of money to do this. And then here we are 13 months later, we have the people that we signed an agreement with coming back to us and demanding $1.2 million. Now, the reason I use the word demanding is because the county now, we're in a situation in which we either have to pull the trigger here or we probably lose it all. I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling at all because we had so many options when we started doing this. And the reason I know these things move along is because when these options were presented to the county on other lands, there were, Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we had 4, and I think we had up to like 10 acre properties that we could have pulled the trigger on, and we could have done it ourselves. We could have bought the land, we could have done everything ourselves, but there was a time issue. And that time issue has now come back to bite us in the you-know-what. Because now we're stuck between a rock and a hard spot. If we say, no, we can't afford what you're selling. Thank you, but we can't do it. We don't have the ability right now unless we get moving in big time fashion to find some land and start doing it ourselves. But that incurs some time cost. And when I say it's actually opportunity cost. The time that it's going to take to get the land, close on it, find a builder to build on it, it could be next year this time and we're still sitting here. And we have to get this money spent by next year this time. So the county's in a really bad spot. The taxpayers are in a really bad spot. First of all, my first inclination is Alamance County should never have got into this business. The state of North Carolina showed us a blueprint of why this isn't very good idea is because it's so incredibly expensive. The capital outlay that you have to put into this particular idea is astronomical. And the cost, as we just see, never go down. They're always inclination is to go higher at all times. So I guess the reason I said I should probably not even got into this, but it just seems like it's on my mind on this because it seems like the county is being put in a situation in which we can't say no. We can't say no, and it's going to cost us multi-millions of dollars going forward. So that's a bad position to be in. You can't say no now because, Sherry, I think it's almost impossible for us to get this done in the next 13 months. There we are. So now we have no options, and I'm an options guy. If you have no options, you're toast. You have nowhere you can go. You can't navigate through the minefield because you are the minefield. So I think that's what I'm trying to say is why, I guess if I'm talking to the gentleman who started the project, I guess I would ask him this particular question as far as now that I have no options. I'm going to ask him what his options are. Why don't the builder swallow the $127,000 increase rather than my taxpayers. He had an agreement in September of 2022, and we did everything we could to satisfy that agreement. He is the one who did not take care of his side of the bargain. So why can he or they come to us and ask us for $1.2 million over a contract that we signed 14 months ago? No one in this room who would have ever signed a contract with a company to do work for you, and then that company comes back to you 13, 14 months later and tells you, you owe me another 27% of what I told you. I don't think anybody in this room would pull the trigger on that and say, absolutely not. And they might even contact a lawyer. But I'm just a layman here. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if that's true. But I just wanted to say that. That's what's been on my mind ever since I got the presentation that this was going to cost us an extra $1.2 million when we signed the MOU with this organization 13, 14 months ago. So, but I digress. But I'm just not very happy about not having options. It does not make me feel good at all.
Mr. Lashley, if I may, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. We have worked with VIA over the last year. They actually demanded payment last year under the lease agreement that we talked about and that you just described. We came to realize that the terms of the MOA as drafted were probably not quite exact enough as to when that lease payment should start. Mm-hmm. So they have worked with us. We have not made any payments at this point under the lease agreement or under the MOA. And we had a meeting a few days ago and talked about some of the need for payment after the warm shell was finished this summer, but we have not at this point paid anything to VIA in favor of this lease agreement. And they're working with us to try to redraft some of this to make sure that people understand what obligations are. I understand your concern about the increase in the pricing, and I understand that completely, but they have been a good partner to us in being willing to work with us on the drafting of the agreement to make sure that it meets.
Now that we know these things have changed, and so the county is not swallowing the whole nut here, when I say that, I mean it like this. If you came with, you had very good intentions to produce what you said you were going to do an MOU, and it didn't occur, is there any way that as the county could we negotiate with this owner of this facility to see if they can help us? Like, why should the county take it all and swallow it all? Why can't the person in the organization? Because to be honest with you, Rick, the people who own this for 10 years.
These costs down. Unfortunately, the inflationary cost of building any building in Alamance County or anywhere in the country right now is going up. And, you know, they only can do pre-pricing on so much stuff. And so when they quoted the original price for this facility, the upfit, they did it based on square footage costs of the facility at the time they made the quote. Those costs have went up significantly across the system since that initial quote. We'd have to go back to that builder and see exactly how they would want to approach that.
Well, I'm just saying, if you made a mistake and doing the contract, and you didn't dot your I's, you didn't cross your T's, and some things fell through. Those things happen. Those things are what you have to do is to sort of anticipate that these things could occur and make the adjustments going forward. And when those adjustments aren't made, and then you come back, I think it would be incumbent upon the owner to show us good faith, to say, hey, look, I made a mistake when giving that MOU. I was under the market. He should have some downsides to his decision, not just the county taxpayer having to take it all. That's why I'm saying, can we negotiate with this person? And if you want me to come with you, I'll be more than happy. I negotiate that's what I do for a living. I will be more than happy to come and talk to them, and to see what we could do to rectify why everyone can take a little. That's why we have insurance companies. All insurance companies sell risk on the market. So each and individual insurance company has a little bit of risk of everybody else's work. This is a prime example of what we should do as well. We should at least ask the owner to make some conciliations to us, because we didn't present him with the contract. He presented us with the contract. And we went, I know you spent a lot of work on this. So that's why I'm saying we should really talk to the owner of the operation here and see if we can get them to make some concessions, considering that I just believe that he is in the wrong here. And when you're in wrong in business, you gotta pay the consequences, and it's called writing a check.
Mr. Lacia, let me interrupt
Yes,
and
sir.
ask a question as to that point. As I remember our negotiations 13 months ago, it was for the structure, not for the outfitting. So I think we may be talking about two different numbers altogether.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. There's a number of different things here. So there's multiple agreements, and there's also multiple pots of money that we're talking about for different things. So the agreement between the county was never with the builder of the building. Our agreement is with VIA, and VIA has a lease agreement with the builder.
Okay.
And we saw a copy of that lease, but we didn't necessarily get to weigh in substantially on the terms of the lease. So the agreement they entered into with Chadco for the building was different and separate from our agreement with VIA. And so what I was talking about in terms of the payments are the payments that we are to make to VIA based on our portion of their lease with Chadco. So I appreciate your point, and I think you're exactly right. There's got to be a conversation about where to limit cost overruns. Our role in that is like the third wheel, as it were. So we don't have a direct relationship with the builder that will allow us to directly sit down and say, hey, we're going to cut this or cut that. But I do think, like we talked about before, VIA is trying to do that, and we're trying to give them input on what we think is most meaningful. We have different pots of money also that are being used as part of the project. So some are the MOE funds, some are dedicated funds from the state for upfitted facilities. There's 1.2 million in Cardinal funds. So there's a lot of confusing elements in terms of what's brought to bear. But we're trying to make sure that we lock down what we're committing to on a ongoing basis as far as our portion of the lease payment. That's the biggest item, I think.
All right.
Mr. Lacia, I apologize.
Oh, it's all
I'm in
good.
total agreement with that. Please continue.
No, I'm fine. I'm finished. Thank you for your time.
Sure, of course.
Mr. Carter.
Well, I think we're all in agreement on that issue, and I appreciate Mr. Stevens' comments there. It helps put it in perspective about where we stand in that, so. A couple of questions, and an observation, from a security perspective, as Ms. Thompson pointed out, law enforcement ought to be willing to get involved in this across the board from all agencies, because as it stands right now, if a police officer or a deputy sheriff delivers somebody to the emergency room who's under a crisis situation, an officer has to remain with that individual in the emergency room until that individual is released, or a bed is found for that individual someplace where they can be held under security. So that's tying law enforcement up. So it'd be a whole lot easier to have one officer providing security and then being able to call for backup, I would think, if that was necessary, than to have, they ought to be willing to step up on that. And I'm sure the sheriff's department will be willing, that is already willing to, because he's been pushing for this for a long time. Question on the adults and the children, the 16 beds.
Yes.
Is that all-inclusive 16 between the adult and the children's?
They did 16 beds just for adults.
So what happens in the children's? Is that a separate entity
If
then?
they needed an inpatient stay, they'd have to be transferred to a different facility. So, and right now, there's only, I think there's a total of 4 facility-based crises in the whole state for children. Definitely a lack of those as well. So those children would either go into a residential treatment program or into an inpatient hospital setting today. As you know, the state of North Carolina is currently working with the University of North Carolina to open a new facility up in Vance County. They're converting the Alcohol and Drug Treatment Center in Vance County to a child facility. And so that will be a relatively close, brand-new facility to help support children.
So if the 16 beds were not all occupied, could a child be, like, they can't be put in an adult side at
They're
all?
completely licensed differently with different requirements, and so it's really impossible to mix those populations in the same facility.
Okay, I thought that's the way it was, but I just wanted to make sure. Specialized care. Now, obviously, you can't have every specialty in the property at all times. So 24 hours a day, I presume you tie in then specialists who are on call to come in
Yeah, they're going to be on call, or maybe referral to a provider that's in the community, right, that has that specialized care. So it's not only being able to have it there, but it's the linking and the coordinating, that warm handoff, which becomes critical, where they may have a peer support specialist that connects that person to a specialty provider within the local community. The important thing is the people in the facility know who all those people are, what they're doing, and how to really access those supports without somebody else having to figure it out, right? Like, we don't walk around with yellow pages anymore, right? Like, where do you look in your phone book for your sex offender treatment program, right? You Google it online and figure it out. And so we really have to have some people that really are not only know what's available, but also aware of all the different things that are happening in the community, support programs, nonprofit organizations, in order to make sure people get connected correctly.
So what would be the highest level of care capability that would be on site?
It would be the 16-bed facility-based crisis facility. So that will be, once it gets all the way through licensure, it will be an IVC, involuntary commitment designated facility. And so that's right under, state or hospitalization at a hospital.
Okay.
Right below that.
Okay, that's all I have.
First off, as to law enforcement, I would point out the new facility is inside the municipality of Burlington. So I think Burlington should have some responsibility and presence on site. Additionally, our good sheriff has been very, very supportive, and I feel comfortable that he will see to it that we have security and things of that sort. I assume the Elizabeth Drive facility that RHA is now utilizing would go away.
Correct.
So that would be a savings to the county and RHA, and they would move into your facility. So that's a positive aspect of this.
Correct.
I know when we were working with Alamance Regional Medical Facility, now Cone, I suppose, whatever it goes by today, they were talking about cutting a route through their parking lot from this new facility to straight into the emergency room. Is that still a possibility?
It's still a possibility. It's been, it's not on the forefront of their things to do in the next period of time, and so it's been discussed, but we do not have a plan or a timeline for making that happen.
It would be awfully easy to do. And you would not have to go back on Kirkpatrick, Huffmanville, or anything else than to transport.
We agree.
Yeah. Board, do you have any other questions?
And I will say, I think the law enforcement conversation, at least what we're having, has a lot to do with the staffing shortages in law enforcement. Right. They're struggling with maintaining their own staffing, and I think that maybe played into some of the earlier conversations of what they could commit to.
Are you recommending that we do anything today other than intake?
We wanted to just bring this information to you. We are working on an amendment to the MOA that will come back before the board for approval once we have gone back and forth between our agencies and have a document that we're asking for approval.
And that's being worked on as we speak?
Yep, we're still working on that.
All right. Correct. And we thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you very much.
You don't.
Yeah.
I've had a request for a 10-minute break. So we're gonna take a 10-minute break and come right back.
Oh, yes, that's really good. Right on.